On tonight's panel, Paul Scully, Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, an MP since 2015 and a campaigner for Brexit in the 2016 referendum. Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Health, former advisor to Gordon Brown and Ed Miliband, Jon Ashworth. Layla Moran, elected as an MP in 2017 by overturning a majority of 10,000, now Liberal Democrat spokesperson for education. First Vice President of the European Parliament and an MEP for Fine Gael, Mairead McGuinness. And journalist and author, Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome on this Halloween night to our panel, to our audience here, and of course you at home. Join in the conversation. You can argue along in the usual fashion using hashtag BBCQT on Facebook, on Instagram and on Twitter. Right, let's get started with our first question tonight, which is from Fiona Murray.
Can a general election solve the Brexit crisis?
Well, Mairead, we've got you here on the programme tonight. I mean, it's the 31st of October. I guess you thought you'd be talking about something else, like we were going to be out. Goodbye, Britain.
Well, I think that's why I was invited to be on this programme, because
we're always glad to have you,
the
Mairead.
invitation came before there was talk of an election. So, yes, I think we had all anticipated that this would be, if you like, Brexit Day. I think your question about how a general election can solve it, I suppose there's been 3 years where there has been no solution, but I think we're closer to getting a resolution. From a European Parliament point of view and the European Union, we would like to move on. We would like to get to the next phase of this. I'm not sure how an election will turn out. So therefore,
do you think it will solve the Brexit crisis? That's the question.
Well, we've had an election in the past that didn't. It exacerbated the problem to some extent. So I'm not sure what will happen this time. And I think it's too early. The campaign hasn't started. We knew there would be an election. I think Boris Johnson was looking for that. I think it is interesting, though, that the withdrawal agreement got through a first stage in the House of Commons. So that was the first time we saw that there was some progress. I think the fact that we're going to move into 2020 and Brexit is not finished is quite extraordinary. And I think as an audience, you must find that extraordinary, whichever way you voted. That, you know, imagine 2016 and 2020.
So, Mairead, can I ask you, were you surprised in the EU that Boris Johnson didn't push on with his withdrawal?
Well, I thought he might, and I'm not sure why. Perhaps these other panellists will understand why he decided to freeze the process rather than move along with it, because there was some time that the House of Commons could have looked at the details of the bill, and perhaps the House of Lords, and it perhaps could have been done with a slight extension. But look, there may be other reasons why the Prime Minister decided he needed to go to the country, perhaps to get an overall majority, but that was tried in the past by the last Prime Minister, and I'm sure other people on this panel have other hopes and dreams for what might come of the next election. Well, but whatever way, I think the uncertainty is awful. It's awful for you, I think it's awful for us, it's awful for business, and it's awful for Europe as a whole. There are so many other issues that we need to deal with at a European level, and you need to deal with nationally, so it's not good.
So, Layla Moran, the Lib Dems are pushing for this election at the back end of last week. This is clearly something you want to happen, presumably before revoke Article 50 could possibly become something that is obsolete if the election doesn't go your way.
Indeed. So we really wanted...
That was a solitary and rather pathetic move, I may say.
We really wanted... Actually, the cleaner way to have done this would have been to put the Brexit deal in a referendum back to the people and ask them if that's what they wanted. But as you've just heard from Mairead, it got through. Boris Johnson's bad Brexit deal got through off the back of Labour votes. Through that second reading,
yes,
was
but
on
we
its
know
way.
About this, Layla. Will a general election solve the Brexit crisis? That's a question.
We felt that this was the only way that the public could have their say on this deal and get their say on if they want Brexit at all. Brexit has been... Crisis is the right word. Fiona, you're absolutely right. This is a crisis. It's a national embarrassment. We need to move on. And there is no other way to actually make this stop. And perhaps that's one thing we can all agree on. We need to make this stop. We need to focus on other things. And that's why the Liberal Democrats are standing on a manifesto commitment to stop Brexit once and for all. No deal and further negotiation. No, let's negotiate another deal and put it back and another... No, we would make it stop on day one. We'd move on and talk about public services and everything else that people actually want politicians to deal with right now.
So, Jon, For Labour, I mean, I didn't get the impression that Labour was desperately keen to come to the general election.
We're keen for an election. When you look,
when you say you're keen now, do you think it will solve the Brexit crisis?
I tell you, when there's 4.5 million people on the waiting list and over 600,000 waiting beyond 18 weeks for treatment, we're desperately keen for a general election.
So you weren't bounced into it by the Lib Dems and the SNP calling for it before you?
No, we've been calling for a general election.
No, but I mean, once the EU had made the decision about the extension.
Times. But to answer Fiona's question, can this general election solve the Brexit crisis? Well, it has to. Because today we were supposed to leave the European Union. Boris Johnson promised us that on the 31st of October we would leave the EU, do or die. He said he would rather die in a ditch than not leave. Well, I've not noticed if he's in a ditch or not tonight.
Well, actually, we haven't seen the last few hours.
Boris Johnson has failed
presumably.
on his solemn pledge to the British people. So we do need a general election, and in that general election, I'm sorry, I don't think it's democratic just to cancel Brexit. I voted Remain as well, but I don't think you can just say, oh, we'll cancel it. I think the democratic thing to do is put it back to you guys, is put it back to the British people and give you a referendum.
Fiona, you asked this question. Do you think a general election is the way to solve the Brexit crisis?
No, I don't. And for one thing, what happens if we have a hung parliament? Where does that leave us? What happens then? And I agree entirely with what Mairead was saying about the fact that Boris didn't need to call a general election at the moment because he'd got the Withdrawal Act through the second reading. So why did he call a general election for December? Just before Christmas. We don't want to be thinking about a flipping general election. We want to be getting out and buying our Christmas presents.
So Paul Scully, why didn't Boris Johnson stick with trying to get withdrawal? Particularly given that during the leadership campaign, Boris Johnson said it would be the height of folly to have an election before Brexit.
Because we are where we are, where we're in a situation where Boris has tried to inject some positivity, some energy, some enthusiasm into this whole debate. And I think whatever you think about Boris, whatever you think about the direction he's taken, you cannot fail to see that he has a sense of direction. That he wanted to leave by October the 31st. We've tried twice now. We should now be talking about how we're leaving, not still whether we're leaving. And what has happened is that he put the bill through Parliament, and yes, people agreed to that first stage, the second reading. But it was clear by voting down the programme motion that they were going to be playing games.
Boris Johnson playing games
with the bill. They're talking about the customs union, which is all part of the second
democratic
part. This is all part of the future relationship, not how we leave the
Parliament
EU.
Taking back
so
control.
it's absolutely clear that the only way that we can get this sorted out is through a general election. We have a parliament that does not represent public view at the moment. Does not represent...
Isabel.
So look, the truth is that there is a horrible possibility, as the lady there said, that this general election will not actually solve the Brexit situation because there could well be a hung parliament. And the only way that this election will solve the Brexit situation is if there is a big Leave alliance. So that will involve the Tories swallowing their pride and doing some kind of deal, whether it's informal or formal, with the Brexit Party. Otherwise, what will happen is that the Leave vote will be split up and down the country, and the Tories will not be able to win a majority and will be all the way back where we were to begin with. And I would just like to ask Layla here, I am genuinely bewildered. This is a genuine question here. Your idea is just to stop Brexit. I just wonder what you think the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit are actually going to do if you just scrap it. Do you think that they are just going to kind of slope off and accept that they were too wrong, they were really stupid, they're just going to go back where they came from?
No. Don't put words in my mouth, Isabel.
No, I'm asking you what you think. I'm asking you what you think.
No, not at all. First of all, to make sure it's very clear, if the Liberal Democrats are elected in a majority government on a Stop Brexit manifesto, then that's what we're going to do. That's exactly what we're going to do.
But that doesn't answer my question about all the people that voted to leave.
Can I just say, I think most people now are sick of these panels talking about Brexit all the time.
So let's get it
done. Well, tell you what, let's speak to the audience then and see what they think.
It's the NHS, it's schools, and actually the only way to make Parliament talk about anything else in the next few years is to stop Brexit. Actually, I think they'd appreciate that.
Okay, well, let's ask them. Let's ask them, because there's lots of hands. I'd like to hear from lots of you. Yes, the young man there in the T-shirt.
Well, I was too young to vote in the referendum. However, it was a democratic choice. The Lib Dems and the Labour Party are an absolute disgrace. The Liberal Democrats don't even know what democracy means, and the Labour Party's manifesto of 2017 was to deliver Brexit.
Right.
And all they've done is vote against it at every chance. Bring on a general election, and I hope Boris gets a majority, delivers Brexit, and defeats a Marxist Jeremy Corbyn government.
Yes, the woman there.
So I'm just curious as to how many MPs have quarterly reviews, because if you were in any other job other than the one you're in, I'd have you all on performance improvement plans.
For everybody. Okay. Yes, the woman there.
So, Paul, you said that the government doesn't represent the population, but...
No, I said Parliament doesn't represent.
The Parliament, sorry. The Parliament doesn't represent the population, but this is the third time that we're asking people who they want to represent them, but we haven't asked them for an up-to-date opinion on where they stand today on... we're quoting 17 million people. Do every single one of those 17 million people still feel the same? Yeah. Yes. And, I'll come back to you in a minute. And every voice in this audience is a single voice, so that isn't an answer to that question. We don't know. We actually don't know.
I'll answer that.
People may have gone in both directions.
I'll take a few more points, and then, Paul, you can answer. The man at the back with his hand in the black top.
Is this election going to be on anything aside from Brexit? Are there actually... I'm a working GP in the NHS, and I see day after day access problems being a massive issue, but it seems as this is just going to be a second referendum, pretty much. If you voted Leave or you voted Remain, you just want to see what your politicians actually voted for, really. And I think we need to kind of focus on other issues as well as Brexit.
Okay. And the woman here in the corner.
I voted Remain in 2016, but have changed my mind. And, well, it'd be a travesty, I think, if there was a second referendum.
Can I ask you what's made you change your mind?
Lots of issues, really, but mostly the treatment of leavers, I would think. I work with a lot of disadvantaged people who did vote to leave, and I think it's really unfair that they've been smeared and labelled as fascists, and it's just not right.
Let me just take one more point before I go back to the panel. The woman at the very back with the glasses.
We're talking about whether we think a general election can solve Brexit. I think actually we've forgotten that Vote Leave is accused of breaking electoral law. Dominic Cummings, who is currently is an advisor to Boris Johnson, is currently in such a position of power, yet he refused to stand before Parliament and talk about breaking electoral law. He's in contempt of Parliament. I'm not sure whether we can ever have a free and democratic and fair election before those issues are sorted out. I'm not sure we can solve Brexit in this way.
I think when it comes to the Leave.EU campaign, they, as far as I know, they were cleared of a number of things, actually. So I'm not entirely sure that you're right about that. Yeah. They were accused of overspending, and they spent money on... But no criminal charges were brought in the end, were they?
Absolutely not.
No criminal charges were brought against the Leave.EU campaign.
I think you'll find some Remain groups were fined as well by the Electoral Commission.
Absolutely. The vast majority of allegations about both the Leave campaigns were proved to be completely unfounded. This was propaganda, and the Electoral Commission, which is highly biased, refused to investigate the other side to the extent it investigated.
Well, I'm not sure they'd agree they're highly biased either. But anyway, I'm going to take a couple of points before I go back to the panel. Yes, the man in the yellow shirt at the very back.
OK, so I voted for Jonathan's party, Labour, in 2017 under the premise that they'd respect and support the outcome of the 2016 referendum. Since then, I can't believe you have the absolute audacity to sit there and criticise Boris when he's actually made an effort to get us out and respect what we voted for. You have sold... It's almost like you've got a case of Remain amnesia. You've sold your soul out to the Liberal elite, and the irony is, a lot of them aren't very satisfied with you either. They're going towards Layla and the Lib Dems. So actually, people up and down this country tonight going trick-or-treating, I really hope that you don't fool people the second time round, and I hope that the latest poll readings give you a Halloween fright.
And let me just say one last thing. The woman sitting next to you. Yes, the woman sitting next to you there.
I personally think that a general election won't solve the problem of Brexit, and that we should put it back into the hands of the people. Because as part of the almost
So you want another referendum?
Yes. I want another referendum because I, as part of the almost 1 million young people who were born between 1998 and 2001 who can now vote, want a say in something that's going to impact the rest of my life.
Right. Well, Jon, Paul, you've both got points you need to come back to. Jon, do you want to start?
Only that, I don't think democracy is something to be scared of, and ultimately the people should decide. This is one of the biggest questions facing the country.
They have done, Jonathan, they have
I know,
done.
but some people thought we would leave with a no deal. So the sort of Brexit Party and Nigel Farage say we should have a clean break, a World Trade Organisation no deal. Boris Johnson is putting forward a deal which we don't agree with, and the gentleman here in the T-shirt who, you know, I respect the way in which you put your views in a very forthright way. We did say in our manifesto that we respected the result, but we couldn't support a damaging no-deal Brexit, nor could we support a Brexit which undermines workplace rights and environmental standards. And I'm afraid that's what Boris Johnson's deal does. The Tory party, by the way, is playing games. Boris Johnson's deal got through its first stage in Parliament, and then Boris Johnson pulled the bill and refused to negotiate in Parliament with the other parties about getting a sensible timetable. So Boris Johnson's Tory party is playing games with Brexit as well, I'm afraid.